High Court in Johannesburg has dismissed with costs Ace Magashule's attempt to appeal a court ruling upholding his suspension. The court found there was no reasonable prospect an appeals court would rule differently. But that's not all that's happening on the ANC front. The party is also dealing with problems across the country. We joined now by the ANC national spokesperson, Pule Mabe, to reflect on that as well. Thank you for making time, Pule. So the suspended Secretary General's application for leave to appeal has now been dismissed with cost. You must have welcomed this as the ANC.
Afternoon, Clement, and afternoon to your viewers. Of course, we have noted the decision of the court. You would recall that when the SG brought the application to court to set aside that decision, to have requested him to step aside from his position as Secretary General while he's still indicted to appear before a court of law, consistent with the decision of our 54th National Conference. We will have put our own responding affidavit to that, asserting that this decision is consistent with the decision of conference and in accordance with policies of the African National Congress coming out of the NGC prior to the NGC of 2015, prior to the 2017 conference, which NGC shall have resolved that we need to work towards restoring the integrity and credibility of the African National Congress. Amongst the things that we were then charged to do was to establish an integrity commission with teeth, make sure that those of our cadres who are indicted to appear in a court of law are requested to set aside, and that the National Executive Committee would then have to develop a framework spelling out conditionalities attached to those of our cadres who are asked to step aside. We have worked extensively as this NEC to make sure that we implement that decision of conference, and that in implementing such a decision, we do not infringe on the rights of members. We've ensured that there is a 6 months review in terms of which a member who shall have been asked to step aside can still appear before the relevant committee in the organization, for that matter, the National Executive Committee, for the reviewal of their stepping aside. Yeah. So in this instance, the court upheld that decision taken by the National Executive Committee requesting our Secretary General to step aside.
All right. And how far is that review process? Just update us on the internal processes. Has he appealed internally, and how far is that process? And that body that was meant to be established to deal with appeals when it comes to this issue of step aside, has it been established?
Well, of course, we have spoken to names, Clement. We have publicized them on the statements. When we spoke about this committee, we also pronounced on the names. I wouldn't know what are the matters of appeal brought before that body for consideration and ultimately ratification by the National Executive Committee.
How are you dealing? I want to get to the issue of lists now, Pule. We have been speaking to our reporters who one, Govan Wirtles, was outside the Gauteng legislature, the members of the ANC from TSHWANE who are raising concerns about the ANC lists and how they have been manipulated, those processes. Our Pule Lichwiti Jones is in the Northwest, also has been telling us about the concerns that ANC members have there. Some people have been killed in KwaZulu-Natal. One person died in the Northwest. How are you dealing with these disputes as the ANC?
Well, you'd also recall that coming out of the 54th National Conference, we have been directed to establish the Electoral Committee, which we have since established, led by our former Deputy President, Comrade Kgalema Motlanthe, to be able to deal with all of these issues, working together with provincial list committees, your regional interviewing and vetting panels, to make sure that in the most transparent manner, the organization is able to deal with whatever concern that might have been brought forward. Of course, the Office of the Secretary General, led here by the Deputy Secretary General, had already written a communique to our structures last week advising them that by 11 a.m. on Saturday, it will be the cut-off time for the submission of such appeals, and further said that should there be disputes that are not resolved, those disputes can also stand over up until after local government elections. We've dealt with this kind of issues in the past. If you recall, even post 2011 local government elections, we'll have established the Dr. Mngozana Dlamini Zuma's commission to deal with matters pertaining to the selection of councillors. And should we find that they are those that would have found themselves on the list of candidates wrongly, we will of course cause and force a by-election in that area should the ANC have emerged victorious. We are quite serious about this. We are not going to allow any shortcuts or others trying to maneuver their way undermining process of organization. This is not going to happen.
But what's your message to the members, Pule, given that these disputes are now seemingly costing lives?
The situation in KwaZulu-Natal, wherein 3 of our members have lost their lives in a drive-by shooting, is quite unfortunate. We have never imagined that some of these incidences could take place in our own events. We have condemned such, together with the Provincial Executive Committee of KwaZulu-Natal, who had visited the families of those that have lost their lives, including understanding the conditions, as well as visiting those of our cadres, about 8 of them who have been hospitalized. We also urged our members in Inanda, in that specific community, to work closely with the police to expose the identities of those that may be involved in these horrific incidents. Because when we work with law enforcement agencies, we'll also be able to ensure that there is the necessary safety of our members in our own meetings. The ANC is not a violent organization. The ANC does not associate with thuggerism, hooliganism, and gangsterism. The ANC is a very peaceful organization, and that even those that would have been serving as councillors now, we have urged them that should they not have made the cut in terms of nominations in their own communities as prospective councillors, that they should work with those that emerge in those community meetings. You see, Clement, the difference between a process of the ANC and that of other parties is that our processes allow communities to decide on who should become their public representatives. So all of us should actually act and work to respect decisions of communities. Because when communities have got a sense that those that lead them as what councillors are men and women who have emerged out of a process that they shall have participated in, then you are sure that there will be stability in that ward, there will be a sense of harmony in that ward, there will be greater cooperation and partnership between the government or the municipality and that specific community. So we are quite concerned about what happened over this past weekend, and hope and believe that within the shortest time possible, police will have apprehended the monsters that are involved in this kind of deadly act.
And just quickly, Pule, have you started paying the salaries? There were reports that you've already started dispatching salaries to your employees that haven't been paid in 3 months. Are you able to confirm that?
Well, of course. I mean, those reports are honest and truthful. The message we must, of course, send to ANC employees is that it is important that going forward, they themselves are found to be active in the life of the organization, because the ANC is not going to find it possible to sustain the welfare of employees who are not performing organizational duties. It is now all hands on deck. We expect all our employees to give their full-time attention to the work of the ANC. Where there are challenges, we will still continue to do what we have done to make sure that we communicate with them through their own representatives and update them on whatever challenges that we could be facing. We must again thank those of our employees who have still committed their time, even under the most difficult of times, when the organization could not necessarily meet their monthly obligations on time.
All right, Pule, thank you so much for your time. ANC spokesperson Pule Mabe. More news at the top of the hour.